Welcome folks. In this video I want to show you how to get set up for your first project. In this project we're going to make it our primary goal to refactor an existing site using Sass and any other best practices you pick up or know about from other exposures you've had. But just working with Sass and also using a GitHub repo, these could be enough of a learning curve that if you do just those things, you'll be satisfying my requirements. But do feel free to push further if you desire to do so. So here are the steps we're going to go through in this video. In a separate video, I will show you how to actually do some refactoring with the power of Sass. And then in a likely third video, we will look at the actual merge process and feedback process that we'll get into. So let's dive in. First, what we need to do is, actually I should say, I'm assuming we've done before this, is identify a project that we're going to be refactoring. So in my case, I have a corner bakery website that I worked on with a previous student and used in my thesis, but it's all with just plain CSS, and I'd like to refactor it and get it up on GitHub. So first we need to go actually set up a repo on GitHub and a actually we're going to wait and do the develop branch later. Let me pull that out. So set up a repo. Okay, so over here in GitHub, I'm going to click new repo. I'm going to go corner bakery. Yep, that'll do. So it has to be public unless you've paid to have private accounts. And it's a good practice to have a README, but I think that's a topic we can leave for another day, so we're not going to initialize with a README. Yeah, let's keep it. All right, so we're going to click Create Repository, and now it's all set up, ready for us to go. It just doesn't have any code contents. So we're going to want to do this in our desktop app. So I'm assuming you have downloaded and installed the actual GitHub desktop. So one of the options is to actually click Setup in Desktop, which should prompt us to open the desktop app. When we do that, in a moment it should open. And it has grabbed all of the relevant data because we clicked on this, and we're ready to actually fine-tune these settings. However, I want to walk you through doing this yourself so that you don't just rely on that feature. If we are in GitHub Desktop and want to add a new repository, what we do is go File, New, Clone Repository. And that's going to ask us for the URL or username repository. So enter repository URL or GitHub username and repository. So what we need to do is go over here and typically grab something like this, or we could use the SSH and grab this. Either one should work. I'm going to drop in that one. Now it wants to know where we want to put this site locally. So I have files on my desktop in a corner bakery folder, but what I'm going to actually want to do is create a new folder that I can kind of duplicate these files into and use as my local repository. So in my sites folder, I have a Web3 projects folder. I've just kept it really short so I can navigate more easily. And I'm going to create a, oops, I'm not going to do it here. I'm going to do it through GitHub. I'm going to actually, they've suggested one for me, but that's not what I want. I want to go and choose that folder myself. There's my Web3 projects. Okay, and I don't want to just put my thing here. I want it in a subfolder that actually matches my repo. So corner bakery. Okay, so this matches my repo, and it's going to contain my site folder, site files eventually. So here we go, open, and now I'm just double checking. No, we actually want it to go right into, oh boy, I see what it wants. It wants me to just identify the parent folder, so scratch that. Moving back to here, we're just going to go sites, and into the parent folder, I'm going to delete this guy, empty my trash, sorry about that. So it's going to add the corner bakery folder for me. So I want to go right in here to Web3 projects, click open, and you can see it's put corner bakery right after that. All right, so now we click clone, And it's cloned with my actual remote repo, which is great because there's nothing in there. Okay, so now I need to just add my actual files. So we have finished this one, and we're moving on to the next one. Oh, actually, we've even done that much. We've cloned it, and now we're going to add the existing site files, commit them, and then we'll push them up. So I'm basically going to my desktop folder, grabbing all my files and copying them, and then pasting them here into my repo folder. All right, so I've pasted them there. So if I move back to GitHub Desktop, it should recognize all these new files. And it's automatically selected them, automatically staged them, assuming I want to add all of them in this commit. And that is true. So I've got all of them selected, and I'm going to say initial file set from previous project. All right, I'm going to commit to master, and now you can see that commit has been made and these files are here. But they are not on GitHub yet because I did not actually push them to my remote repo. So I can say publish branch back here in GitHub Desktop. And in just a few moments, you can see it's working on pushing all of that up. There are actually some images here, so this takes a little longer than it normally will. Okay, great. So now if I switch back over here and refresh, hey, look at that. All of my files from my site are now committed and pushed to my repo. So instantly, this is now something I could share with others or do other work with. But what I actually want to do is create a develop branch and now do some refactoring. So here back in GitHub Desktop, I'm going to go branch, new branch, and enter develop and create branch. Okay, so that branch exists, and I'm going to want to make sure that I switch to it if I'm not, so you can see I am on my develop branch. And so I'm free now to make any changes that I'd like that are sort of in development changes. And I can also go ahead and push this branch so that it has been published, even though there aren't any commits on it. I'm now just telling GitHub that I want to have this as one of the branch options, and you can see the develop branch is now an option in GitHub. Okay, so we've accomplished a couple of big things here in that we've set up the repo, we've added the initial file set, we've added a develop branch, we've pushed it to GitHub, and we've confirmed that everything is ready to run. Okay, so now we need to get busy making our changes. Well, one of the big things that we want to do in terms of making changes is make use of CSS preprocessing using Sass. So I sent you to this website to learn about Sass, and you'll notice that one of the first things it says is, hey, if you want to browse here, go ahead, but we recommend you go ahead and install Sass first. So if you haven't already installed Sass, you're going to want to go here and check out the installation instructions. Now, I want to draw your attention to, both sides here. On the left are some actual applications you can download and use, but notice most of them require you to pay them. There's only a few here. Koala and Prepros has a trial, CodeKit has a trial, and Scout is free. That are something you could use, but I'd like you to consider working through the challenge of actually doing this with command line. It doesn't take much to get going. I will say I survived for many years using just CodeKit and loved that app, so I do recommend this one if you get into it and command line is any trouble. I've also tried Prepros and it's pretty nice. So what we're going to do is work on this side, and the good news is in order to install Sass, you have to first have Ruby installed. So if you're working on a Mac, you're in good shape. Ruby comes out of the box with the Mac OS, so we don't need to install Ruby or do anything else. If you're on Windows, there's some tips here for you. Otherwise, we're going to open our terminal, and we're going to browse to our folder. So let's see. I need to find out where I am from my last little project here. All right, so here I am back at root. So we're going to change directory to sites, and then I was in W3 PRS. Good, and I'm going to change directors into the corner bakery. All right, so now I'm looking at my actual corner bakery folder here, and I'm good to go. All right, so now we're going to do the gem install Sass. Now notice it says gem install Sass, but this is something that you typically, this is a sort of a little package that we want to run regardless of where we are. So we could install it just with gem install Sass, but if you've learned a little bit about terminal, you might find that some things require you to sort of authenticate as a admin user in order to install, and it's very likely therefore that if you try to run gem install Sass, you might get an error saying you don't have permission to do this. So it may be that you have to run sudo, which is super user do gem install Sass. When I do that, it asks me for my password. So if I got that right. And if I did, shortly here, it will start to install the Sass library. Good, it's successfully installed. It's now parsing documentation. One gem installed, and we're good to go. So I can just kind of double check that it's installed by running Sass version. And look at that, we're on the bleeding edge version 3.5.1. All right, good. So we have installed Sass, and now we can continue. So we're going to dive in and talk more about what all of this stuff does. One of the key things we can do is use variables, but that's just a preview. In order to actually be working with Sass, what we have to do is convert a Sass file into a CSS file. Because Sass is an extension, it's not actual raw CSS. So if we want it to become raw CSS, we have to have a compiler watch for changes and convert our Sass file into a CSS file. So what you might do is work on your Sass file, save your changes, work on it some more, save your changes, and eventually when you're done, you're like, okay, now I want to see what this looks like. So you compile the Sass into CSS and you check it in the browser. That's cool, but if you're anything like me, or you've been following any of my methods all along, maybe you're actually checking in the browser a lot more often. So this idea of, like, I don't know, spending several hours working just on a Sass file without any browser refresh, that seems so foreign. I can't imagine doing that. So Sass actually has this ability for us to run an auto compiler that is basically constantly watching whatever folder we tell it to watch and constantly recompiling into whatever folder we tell it to compile into the kind of outputted CSS version of the file. So here's what I recommend. I'm going to open this project in Atom. I'm going to add a project folder. I'm going to point to my corner bakery folder. The common practice is to add inside of any project, add a CSS folder that your Sass will compile into, and a Sass folder that you can work in. All right, so I have these two files, styles.css and reset.css. If I open styles.css, notice that at the very top it's trying to import reset.css. So I really I want both of these to be part of my pre-compiled code in the Sass folder. So I'm going to move them both into that Sass folder. Okay. Which means now I'm going to need to go into any of my HTML files that refer to those and update the path. What's going to happen is, instead of these files being in the root folder now, they're going to go to this CSS folder. So I just need to update it to point to CSS/styles. And I'll do the same thing in each of these other files really fast. Okay, so they should all be updated, and if I tried to open this page right now to just kind of check on things, my styles should not be visible. Right, there's no styles because there's nothing in CSS yet. All I did was move these files in here, and now I'm ready to kind of convert them into Sass files. All you need to do to convert something into a Sass file is to simply rename it with the .scss file extension. So there's my styles.scss, and I'm going to rename this guy to be reset.scss. Okay, so now I have changed them into be actual Sass files, so I can now do Sass stuff in them. But when I save, I want my watch program to automatically convert them into CSS files and move the converted files, or create or update the converted files over here in the CSS folder. So that's where the watch syntax comes in. So notice that on the documentation, what it says is you're going to type in the terminal, Sass _watch space, and then you're going to put in the path to the Sass folder. In this case, they're imagining that it's in an app folder and then a Sass folder, and then a colon followed by the folder you want it to compile to. In this case, they're imagining they have a public folder and a style sheets folder inside of that. Well, in my case, this is simply going to be like this. First of all, of course, we want to make sure that we are in our project folder, so you would want to change directory with CD until you get into the right place. But assuming you are, then you're going to go Sass watch, and if you've been following with me, what we have is a Sass folder, and we're going to publish to a CSS folder. So it should be that simple. So when I start this with a return, now it's going to start watching, and look, right away it compiled those files, and there they are. I have a styles.css, which is the compiled version of styles.scss, and it also has a map file that helps me kind of map between the two when I do my inspecting in the browser. The same happened for my reset.css. I've got a separate reset file. All right, so everything is running the way it should. I should now have those styles available, and that when I refresh, I should see them. In fact, I do. That is good news. Everything is working as it should. So let me try to make some changes in the SCSS folder, like taking out that red border. So when I take that out and save, my compiler should have recompiled. I can move over here and take a peek at styles.css and see that indeed that body border is gone. And if I refresh, I see it's gone there as well. Okay, so we've set up Sass, we've got the watch running. There's one more thing that can make life a whole lot easier, and that is to have an auto refresh going, so that as you save and your Sass recompiles, that there's something else that detects that and refreshes your browser so that you automatically see those changes and you don't have to refresh anymore. You might be used to this if you've been using brackets, but now that we're actually doing compiling with CSS, you might find that that doesn't work quite as planned anymore. So what we're going to want to do is find a tool that allows us to do this auto refreshing dealio. And that tool, or one of the most common for this, is something called BrowserSync. If you go to browsersync.io, you'll find yourself looking at this where it says, hey, all you need to do is type in npm install g BrowserSync. Okay, what does that mean? Well, if we click on Get Started, there's actually a step-by-step process we can walk through that makes this a little clearer. It says the first thing we need to do is install Node.js. Very likely you do not have this installed on your computer yet, but it's very easy to do that by just running to nodejs.org and then clicking on whichever download you want to download and install. I have a feeling that this is software that will be installed by default on most operating systems before much longer. It's becoming so popular. But it does all kinds of cool stuff. It's basically a JavaScript-based system for writing software. In fact, brackets itself is written in Node, and so is Atom, if I'm recalling correctly. So you're going to want to install Node. Once you have installed Node, then in your terminal window, I'm going to hit Command T to get a new tab here. Oops. Let's see what's going on here. Looks like I've got two things going on. I'm going to stop them with Control-C. Control-C stops an operation like this. That's always kind of nice. Okay, I'm not sure which is which, so I'm going to close this first tab. I know this was the one I was working in, so I'm going to start that Sass watch one more time, which sounds too much like Sasquatch, right? Okay, anyway, new tab, I'm going to run npm install g BrowserSync. All right, this is using the Node Package Manager, which stands for npm, to go out and grab BrowserSync and install it. Now, this might be something else that you have to try to run using sudo like we did before. In fact, it might give me that, that error here after it runs. This is another kind of thing where I'm glad you've been willing to jump in and learn terminal, because this really makes a big difference. Yeah, it says, please try running this again as the root administrator. So yes, I do need to go sudo npm install g BrowserSync. And it's asking for my password. Done. Okay, yeah, so just a few little commands, and we're really able to do a lot through the terminal here. But we're just using the Node Package Manager to install BrowserSync right now. All right, when it's done, we can move on to the next steps in the instructions, and that is we just have to start BrowserSync. So we're going to want to move into the folder in which we want to run BrowserSync, and we're going to type in BrowserSync start --server --files, and we're going to type in quotes the kind of files we want it to watch. So I want it to watch for .css, so any file that has a .css extension or any file that has an HTML extension. If you know that you're also going to be working with JavaScript, you can also type in .js like that. All right, so when we, oops, I misspelled it. So if you have a typo, you can press the up arrow and it brings back in the last command you tried to enter, and then you can fix the typo without having to retype the entire thing. It's kind of nice. Did you see my other typo? BrowserSync. Okay, so what BrowserSync does is it pulls up my website on a local host on port 3000 or something strange like that. And you can see that it's monitoring all the while. I can also go to this web address in my browser, and strangely enough, if you have a mobile device that is connected to the very same network as the one that your laptop is on, like a smartphone or a tablet, you can go to the address that I've highlighted here, and it's going to be different based on your own computer. But you can go there, and that device will also be able to see your site and also live refresh and keep in sync with everything you're doing. This is a very, very cool tool. So anyway, we're watching those files in BrowserSync. That's going to refresh the browser for us. We're also running Sass over here, watching for changes to my Sass file. So therefore, I can come in here into my Sass file. I'm going to make sure I'm in the Sass file, and do something like add that border onto body. And when I save, Sass should recompile, and the browser should refresh. Okay, so that's a good place to pause. We've done enough setup. We've made a lot of changes. It's time to commit all those changes. So all along the while here, the GitHub has been, or sorry, Git has been tracking all of our changes, and we can see that we, well, yeah, it's tracked all kinds of things we didn't know it was actually tracking, but it did change. It tracked the changes we made to the path for the styles.css, and it's tracked that we added this new folder CSS with these files in it, and the Sass folder as well over here. So this is all good. We want to go ahead and commit onto the develop branch, implement Sass and BrowserSync. All right, so those are now committed in the history, and if we push them up to develop and switch back to GitHub, we should now see we have, if we switch to the develop branch, we have 2 commits in that branch. Oops. If we look at the commits on develop, and we should see all those files. So There we go. We are set up and ready to actually start talking about Sass.